That's fucking crazy. Oh, that's fucking crazy. Yo guys, what is up? Max in our Borderlands 4 video, and today we're going over REACTOR Harlowe. Now, this is, in my opinion, the highest boss damage build that I've ever posted for Harlowe. You just do not see boss health bars on this setup. It is like genuinely baffling how much damage this setup puts together. We're using some interactions and some tech that I actually discovered when we were putting together the updated Infinicrit build and applying that to Neutron Capture, where we're taking this tech that was giving us a ton of damage on Infinicrit and then applying it to a build that already does a ton of damage to make it do even more damage. So this build is quite similar to the Nuclear Winter Harlowe build. However, we're taking advantage of some new tricks. It's really cool. I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. We're going to do a quick little ad right before that, and then we'll get into the video. Huge thanks to Monster Hunter Outlanders for sponsoring this video. If you didn't know, Monster Hunter Outlanders is a new action-adventure mobile game in the Monster Hunter series developed by the Timmy Studio Group under licenses from Capcom. If you've played a Monster Hunter game before, I think you'll get right into Outlanders, as they're doing a lot of things similar. However, Outlanders is doing some things to really set it apart from the mainline games. One of the big new things that Outlanders is doing is the new Radiant species. Now, this is a special substance that is basically altering the monsters in Outlanders to make them more aggressive, more powerful, and they get different frenzied states during battle to make the fights more engaging and to change up their normal movesets. Another thing that sets Outlanders apart is each adventurer or your character you're playing can take on a different role in battle. So for example, there's the Assault class, which specializes in dealing damage, the Disruptor, which focuses on crowd control and weakening monsters, and then also these Support class, which is focused on enhancing, healing, or rescuing your squad mates in battle. There is also new buddies besides the classic Palicos from Monster Hunter to accompany you into battle, such as the Rudico and the Trillin. The last thing to mention is Outlanders has a big focus on co-op multiplayer and introduces a new mechanic called co-op skills, which during a hunt, you get these co-op skills available to you where you and all your teammates can kind of sync up for a short period, attacking the same part of a monster to activate massive buffs to shift the tides of battle. If you want to check out Monster Hunter Outlanders, you can do so by registering for the closed beta test down below in the description. So how is this build functioning? Let's do an overview and then we'll get into the specifics. So to start, this is a Neutron Capture build. If you did not know, Neutron Capture, whenever we activate our action skill, we shoot out this big chroma accelerator unstable energy pocket that when we detonate it, all of the damage from the detonation and all of the damage of the demon core and all the darts that are going out all get stored in our gun as added damage. It is not bonus damage. It is not based off of how hard you're shooting your weapon or where you're shooting your weapon. It is just added damage. So what really matters for proccing Neutron Capture and doing a lot of damage with it is how often we're hitting an enemy. So things like, for example, Katagawa's Revenge that shoots out all these lightning bolts that tick enemies is going to be really good. Things like the Convergence would shoot all these pellets is going to be really good. Anything that hits an enemy a lot of times will proc our action skill a lot, and this is where a lot of our damage is coming from. Now, in order to get a big Neutron Capture proc, we need to have our action skill hit enemies really hard, because this is damage based off of how hard our action skill hits enemies. So in order to make our action skill hit enemies really hard, we can put on things like Demon Core, which allows it to shoot out a bunch of extra darts that basically 4x the damage of your Neutron Capture at minimum. So we're going to be making sure our action skill hits really, really hard. If our action skill is critting, it's going to be hitting harder, and all of the damage that our action skill deals is going to transfer into our weapon. Now, what this build is doing differently than our old Neutron Capture build is we are going to be speccing big into decoherence. Now, this is a skill that I had tested a while ago, and I thought it was terrible. And then I retested it for specifically Infinicrit and realized that this skill is bonkers. So, Decoherence reads that Harlowe deals increased damage with all sources to entangled enemies. Enemies inside of her flux generator take further increased damage. Now, how I originally thought this functioned was the entangled enemy's bonus damage means that this would be like a 50%, like for example, entangled enemies only take 7% of our damage dealt. I thought this might be that they take 57% of the damage dealt between entangled enemies. So we would be sharing more damage between enemies. It is a 50% multiplier of 7%. So it's like hardly any additional damage transferred to enemies. This is not good for mobbing. It does not increase your damage dealt through entangled by basically anything. However, on single targets, this is 50% bonus damage that you deal to entangled enemies. Meaning that if we are shooting our Chroma Accelerator at something and explode, like it passes through them, when it passes through them or when it gets hit by a Demon Core, they get entangled. And then when we explode our Chroma Accelerator, that does now 50% more damage. This is a multiplier to our damage. Now, the real kicker and why this skill is so super balanced, nothing to see here, Gearbox, is this bonus damage is not registered as an additional number. So, for example, if we were looking at skills like Unstable Isotope, Harlowe deals bonus cryo damage. This bonus cryo damage is not considered in Neutron Capture's damage because it isn't Neutron Capture that's dealing the damage. It's bonus damage on top of that. However, this bonus damage is just a multiplier to the damage that you're dealing. It does not register as a separate damage instance, meaning that this 50% more damage is considered in Neutron Capture. So you might be like, wow, that's great. Now our Neutron Capture hits 50% harder. And you'd be correct. However, that's only half of the equation. Neutron Capture, after it's procced, then takes into account any of your multipliers for on-hit things and gets them again. So, for example, if we have like something like Enriched, this is going to give us 21% increased radiation damage. So our Neutron Capture hits 21% with increased damage, and then Neutron Capture is radiation damage, so it gets that 21% again because it grabs our increases again. With a 50% multiplier, we get the bonus damage with Neutron Capture, but when Neutron Capture hits an enemy, now we're actually shooting at the enemy, it's going to deal 50% more damage again. So when you're using Neutron Capture with Decoherence, not only are we getting 50% more damage, but we're getting 50% more damage twice. And this allows her to just do bananas damage with her Neutron Capture setup. Now, there's 2 class mods in the game that can spec 5 into Decoherence, and it genuinely does not matter which one you are using. I say that because we are only going to be using the Reactor class mod for bossing. I will explain why in a second, but the Reactor class mod can give us 5 into Decoherence. We're only going to be using this for bossing, and the Reactor's like special effect is that you get once you entangle 10 enemies, you get gun damage, fire rate, reload speed, and status effect damage. For like drill sites, that's awesome. You know, you get that damage for like drill site bosses, but most of the time we're not really caring about that. All we care about is the 5 into Decoherence. The other class mod that can spec 5 into Decoherence is called the Physicist class mod. That can roll with Feedback Loop, which we don't really care about, Decoherence, which we do care about, Mass Function, which doesn't really do anything for us, and Harlowe's Certainty Principle, which doesn't really do anything for us. Whatever class mod you get doesn't really matter. You just want to find 5 into Decoherence to enable this like double dipping massive multiplier. Now, the reason we are not using the Reactor class mod for mobbing is if we use the Reactor class mod for mobbing, we do not have a way of actively getting our action skill back. Now, I am using Confirmative Reality. Whenever Harlowe shoots an entangled enemy, she and all of her allies will restore a portion of her action skill cooldown. However, if we're using the Reactor class mod, we do not have a very reliable way with our current spec of entangling enemies once our action skill is over. So after you feedback loop, after you Neutron Capture and kill a bunch of things, if you kill everything, then you have nothing to shoot at to like entangle them, and you just don't have action skill uptime. So what we're going to be using, you could use a Skeptic. We're actually going to be using a Scientist class mod. The Scientist class mod reads that whenever Harlowe shocks an enemy, she automatically entangles and irradiates that enemy. So all we need to do to proc a entangle on an enemy is shocking them. We're going to be using a Watts for Dinner, which whenever we have Energy Shield, whenever we have Overshield, we get bonus shock damage, which can shock enemies. And that class mod also rolls Ripple Effect, so whenever we're killing entangled enemies, like if we kill them while our Neutron Capture is active, it guarantees that there's going to be another enemy, if there's one around, that we will be able to shoot because it transfers entangle to other enemies. So you could definitely use a Skeptic. Because our Nuclear Winter is a Skeptic build, I'm going to keep the Skeptic to that. We're using a Scientist, which is going to give us free entangles and transferring entangles. And then we just shoot at that enemy with Confirmative Reality. As long as we have a multi-pallet gun, we will get our action skill back near instantly. And this works out really, really well. So let's do these skill trees. In Red Tree, we're going Cyclotron for 20% fire rate. This is basically a 20% multiplier to our damage. We do not have much fire rate on this build. That's the big difference between this and the old build, is we're lacking fire rate. So we're making up for it by making sure that we go fire rate. We're not going field ready prototype because action skill damage only single dips on this build. Anything that is elemental damage will double dip. So we're going elementary for the elemental damage, status effect damage, and then enriched for the increased radiation damage. We've got 2 other points to spend. I put them into extra reload speed, more quality of life. Then we're going down the middle to go get Poison Sunned for more radiation damage. We get Chain Reactor for extra bonus damage to entangled enemies. 2 points into Fizzle Launcher so that whenever we damage an irradiated enemy or an entangled enemy, we shoot these radiation darts. We're mainly just trying to get down to Demon Core. We really need Demon Core. The reason Demon Core is so important on this build is because every radiation dart that this shoots out does 4.4k damage at base, and in a detonation is 8.9k. So basically, 2 darts is like the equivalent of a entire explosion, and it shoots out these darts single targets. It shoots these targets, or these darts when you're in a mobbing scenario. They just more than double your damage basically that you get from Neutron Capture. In my opinion, it is a must-have. Then we're going into Green Tree to get momentum for extra crit damage. We've got 5 points into Neutron Decay. This gives us extra gun damage. Gun damage, not super important. This does make it feel a little bit better on the build if you don't have your Neutron Capture up, that you are dealing a bunch of extra gun damage. So that's nice. I put 3 points into Resonance Cascade. This does give us a bunch of action skill damage. Once again, guns aren't really the focus of this build, so Creative Overflow doesn't do all that much for us. Just getting the extra action skill damage is nice. 2 out of 3 confirmative realities, all you really need here for 100% uptime on your action skill with the Scientist. If you wanted to, you could put 3 points here. I don't think it's really necessary. And then we get our 5 points into Decoherence for the massive bonus damage to enemies. Note that I originally tried out a spec that was suggested to me by a guy named Dawnslicer, where we were going critical funding, and we spec down to critical funding, and this was giving us a way to entangle enemies, but it's only a 15% chance on crit, and most of the time you're killing things. It just wasn't really keeping up entangle. Note also that Excited State does not work with Neutron Capture. It only works as it would as intended, because Neutron Capture does skill damage. It does not deal action skill damage, so Excited State does not give you infinite crits on a Neutron Capture build. Really just not worth, in my opinion. But after we put these 5 points, the absolute best way to spend the rest of the points are trying to get as many points in to make Extraordinary. I would love to have 5 points here. We just need a little bit more skill points. This gives us crit chance with all of our skills. This chance increases every time Harlowe entangles an enemy. This effect stacks. The difference of having all of this crit chance on your action skill for your Neutron Captures is massive. This is just way more Neutron Capture damage. It's going to give us a ton of crit chance, not only for Neutron Capture or for a Chroma Accelerator to crit, but this actually does work for Neutron Capture. So now all of our Neutron Capture shots can crit, and it's just must-have points. I would never make a Neutron Capture build without points into this skill. It's too much value for us. I would love to have 5 points here. Once again, I just couldn't really get there. I wanted the 5 points of Decoherence because that's kind of what the build is based on. and we, once again, couldn't sacrifice any points here because we really need Demon Core. So tough choice, but yeah, 4 points in to make extraordinary. For the gear we're using, you can kind of use anything. Some weapons to call out that are particularly great on the build are a Jacob's Katagawa. I recently got a Jacob's Katagawa to roll with COV, and gonna be honest, I'm loving it. You just have to reload way less often if you're using a COV part. I farmed this when it was the big Encore. Really, really nice. Ridiculous damage on this build. Jacob's Conversions, also disgusting on this build. Anything that hits multiple times very quickly will do ridiculous damage. Not sure why I had the bod on. To be honest, the bod is very good, but it's really not necessary on this build. I really love the Complex Root. Hits a bunch of times. If you can get a Jacob's roll, it will absolutely shred bosses. The Midnight Defiance. I know a lot of you don't have this. Midnight Defiance fires out a ton of projectiles. It's disgusting on this build. Basically, anything that hits multiple times very, very quickly will be great on this setup. And then also, I'd keep around a Wombo Combo for any Vile enemies, just because Wombo Combo shreds Viles. For our gear for mobbing, like genuinely, if you are mobbing on this build, please put on a Kill Spring. We do not have a ton of spec into survivability. Kill Spring, when you kill enemies, is going to heal your health. If you have full health, it heals your shield. If you have full shield, it gives you overshield. It's unbelievably nice on this setup and absolutely needed. The build feels way better if you're rocking Kill Spring. For bossing, you don't really need one, so I rock a War Paint that gives me more fire rate and Enrage to increase my damage. For the Ordnance slot, I actually didn't even have a crit knife on. This was a suppressor amp payload knife. You'll note that I didn't throw it once in this entire video. Just kind of needed the one into heating up. For our class mods, I'm using the Reactor class mod with 5 into decoherence. If I'm not using that, I'll be using, we use the Reactor class mod for bossing. We're using the Scientist for mobbing. I recommend trying to find one with at least 1 into ripple effect so that you can get the entanglement sharing and going around. For our shield, we're rocking a Watts for dinner. I've got a amp siphon Watts for dinner. The siphon roll is super helpful because it gives us way more uptime on our overshield, and we can also amp our shots. We don't have infinite amp on this build like we do on Infinicrit, but for the shots that do get amped, they get to deal extra damage, which is pretty nice. And then I'm using a Proficient Quintain. You've seen this in other build videos. Anything that I rock with a Jacob's part, this is pretty nice. Technically, this isn't the God roll. There is another Jacob's that rolls with extra ricochets plus bonus damage. That would be freaking sick. You don't really need the crit chance, particularly on this build. The main thing you're looking for is bounce pass. The extra ricochets really help with mobbing. And that is it for our gear. For our firmware, I'm rocking 3 high caliber. 3 high caliber is super important if you plan on using the Katagawa's Revenge. If you haven't seen my explanations, it doubles the DPS of Katagawa's Revenge, allowing its projectiles to spawn on hit, and then once again, once they hit an object, a wall, or the ground. A lot of the times when I'm shooting the Katagawa's Revenge on this build, I'm shooting at the enemy's feet. I'm trying to hit their toes, so I can hit their toe and then hit the floor, and then proc basically double damage. And then for the rest of the enhancements, personally, because we don't have a ton of fire rate on this build, I went for Bullets to Spare 1. 5% fire rate is honestly really nice. And then I'm rocking 1 heating up for 20% reload speed. Once again, going for some quality of life. You could go for Goo JFC for 15% cooldown and 15% damage. I don't think that's really worth. We don't need the cooldown. 15% action skill damage and the additive soup is not really going to do all that much for us. I'd way rather have reload speed and fire rate, which are genuine improvements to our quality of life and our mobbing and bossing. For our specializations, we're rocking Riddle You This. This gives us increased gun damage. We don't have a ton of gun damage on this build, so this gives us an additional 50%, which is really nice. We're also rocking Contamination. This gives us stacking status effect application chance whenever we're critting. Remember that we need to shock enemies to entangle them, so our status effect chance is really nice on this setup. We're also going to be rocking I Am a Gun. This is going to give us increased action skill damage based off of our gun damage, which, once again, Riddle You This will feed into directly. And then lastly, a Honed Mind. For our action skill, have a chance to crit, and also, when it does crit, to deal increased damage. This is just way more extra damage for our Neutron Capture. Guys, that's going to do it for the build guide. I hope you enjoyed. I will catch y'all in the next one. Take care. Peace.